So, I mean, think about all the great players that he's got to watch play and called games for. It's unbelievable. 46 years. Final Four. National championship in baseball. 2 of them. 2 national championship series. It's crazy. We're going to welcome in John Cohen, Auburn athletic director, was Hail State AD, was the baseball coach, started for several years in baseball when Jim was calling the games, and was on the 1990 College World Series team. And John Cohen joins us on the Out of Bounds show in the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. John Cohen, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. How you doing, Bo?
Well, thank you for doing this on such short notice, but I know he's your friend, Jim Ellis. I know how much respect you have for him, and just kind of your reaction and your thoughts to Jim hanging it up after 46 years.
Yeah, Bo, I'm old enough to remember when transistor radios were everywhere, and
I love it.
And listening to the Jack Bucks and the Jack Brickhouses of the world.
Yeah.
And, I just thought Jim Ellis was in that category, and we're just so fortunate that we had him at Mississippi State for all these years, because his ability to paint the picture, the ability to keep you informed, to entertain you, all of those things were at the highest level, and it's just one of those things that made Mississippi State baseball a national brand. I think Jim was a big part of that.
John Cohen talking about Jim Ellis, 46-year broadcasting career for Hail State. John was an all-SEC baseball player, comes back, takes the baseball job, rebuilds the program, takes them to the National Championship Series, hires Lamonas, who eventually wins the National Championship, talking about his friend Jim Ellis. Do you remember the first time he interviewed you, John?
I do, and I was so incredibly nervous because, in some respects, like, you're more nervous about being around Jim Ellis than a Will Clark or a Rafael Palmeiro, because he is a legend at Mississippi State and beyond. And he's just such a patient guy, kind of an all-seeing guy with the great voice and that gravitas that the great ones have. The thing that you just can't explain. Bo, you're in the business. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He just has that it factor that's just hard to explain.
Well, and I thought, so much about baseball. He had the perfect temperament, John, for the ebb and flow of a game, the ebb and flow of a season. And he was in so many big moments because y'all won so much over the course of his career, between Polk and you and Lamonas. I thought he had the perfect temperament to walk you through a weekend of incredible highs and lows and postseason play.
Agreed. And, the great thing about Jim that I really loved was there were times as a coach, I'd have a conversation with Jim, and I'd say, "Hey, Jim, listen, like, you're pretty hard on our guys right now. I know we're not playing well, but you're good." But that's Jim Ellis, and that's the brilliant. He's right down the middle. When things aren't going well, he's going to tell you they're not going well. When they're going really well, he's going to tell you things are going really well. But he's going to do it in a very objective manner. He's going to give a ton of credit to the opposing team. He's going to recognize their strengths and their weaknesses.
True.
And all the while he's informing you, he's entertaining you all at the same time, which is a very difficult needle to thread.
It is. And he called, as you know this, John, he called a lot of games by himself. And
oh, my goodness, yes.
Look,
yes.
I mean, I've done some games, but I've done thousands of these shows. But when you're doing what Jim did by yourself, whether he was in Hawaii when Ron used to take the team out there, or you're in a conference game or CW, whatever it was, when you're doing games by yourself, especially baseball, because this more than anybody else, there's a lot of downtime. That is extremely difficult, and Jim was able to pull it off. Now, I want to ask you this. We're visiting with John Cohen, AD at Auburn, played at Mississippi State, baseball coach, AD at MSU, knows Jim Ellis very, very well. What was it like for you? Because I thought you did a great job going in the booth and analyzing the game. While you were AD, you would pop in for an inning or two. What was that like for you to sit by him later in life as an AD, but also as a color analyst for an inning or two when you would do that?
Well, I love doing it. And I know it's probably unusual for an athletic director to do those things, but I just felt this bond with Jim. And it was really one of the highlights of my professional career. And I'm sure the others who have sat next to him, Coach Polk probably feels this similar way. All the guys who have sat next to him, you're sitting next to a legend. You're sitting next to somebody who makes it so easy for you because he's carrying the load. You're just having a conversation with him. But not to get too graphic here, but you're right. For a long period of time, it's 3.5 hours without a bathroom break for him.
Right.
I just marveled. It's like he's juggling 20 balls at the same time, just giving you an incredible product for such a long period of time. I can't, there aren't enough expletives, there aren't enough words to describe how much respect I have for Jim Ellis and the craft that he displayed over a brilliant career.
Well, and let's think about this, John. How many guys, because we've had some extraordinary talents in the league call games from many, y'all have, Mississippi State, Auburn, all throughout the league. But think about this. Jim Ellis called a Final Four, SEC championship game in football, and national championship series in baseball. That's pretty damn cool, John. I don't know how many other guys have done that in the Southeastern Conference.
Right. Over a long period of time. And literally just an encyclopedia, an almanac of all things Mississippi State, but also all things SEC and all things college baseball nationally. And listen, he was rarely afraid to state an opinion every once in a while, but his broadcast wasn't strictly about his opinion.
Right.
So I think listen, every one of us will move on to a different chapter in our lives, and I hope that Jim gets to enjoy every minute of it, but that's a real loss for me and really for all of college baseball who have tuned in and enjoyed Jim Ellis.
Well, and you got to, you played, you started, you were on for him to call your games both as a player and coach, that's pretty dang cool right there.
Well, I'm such a geeky nerd with these types of things that I would, even as a player, I would record his broadcast in my dorm room.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then go back after we played it, and I'd listen to it. Because I just, I love the rhythm of it. It's like it's your own listening to a Euripides play. It's just unfolding right into your ears. And they're just, I'm being repetitive here, but there's just so few people who can pull that off, and he's a great one.
Well, and this is something else, John, because you wore several hats at Mississippi State, but nobody ever had to worry about, he was professional. You didn't ever have to worry about Jim Ellis or Jack Crystal embarrassing the university. They're class acts. You didn't have to worry about that. It didn't matter. They were in big moments, Final Fours, big SEC games, big postseason regionals, big College World Series, and you just, as an AD or whoever, or as the president of the university, whenever that was, whoever was going through at the time, you didn't have to worry about Jim Ellis. And I think that's something to remind listeners of too.
The thing I used to tease him about, and you're 100% right, you're never worried about Jim Ellis. He was the last of a generation of broadcasters, and I know this is going to sound crazy, who didn't chain smoke.
You're right.
I know. Of course,
Jack did.
Was a legend, and he was a chain smoker. Jack Buck, all those guys, and part of their voice, you have to believe that part of their voice was due to, years of smoking, and Jim had the great resonance in his voice without smoking.
That's right.
That's something that always gave me hope, because I was never going to smoke, but enjoyed doing what Jim was doing. So, the minute I saw this, and I was in the middle of a meeting, I saw this on social media. It was a tearful moment. It's a moment where, man, it's death taxes and Jim Ellis doing Mississippi State baseball, right?
Well, for you, I mean, there's just so many memories, and it's nostalgic. And whether you were 20 years old or however old you were when you were hired as the baseball coach, and then seeing what the program did, but man, he did it right. He called some big moments and some great players. I mean, I was just going through Showalter, Raffy, Will, Brantley, all the guys you played with, Powell, Rooker, Hunter. I mean, Mangum and TA. It's just, and I missed 100 of them, but it's just amazing. Well, look, John Cohen, thanks so much for short notice and for sharing some wonderful memories and insight on the legendary broadcaster, Jim Ellis, who's hanging it up after 46 years. John, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Bo. I appreciate you thinking of me, and golly, what an incredible – thank you for recognizing the brilliance and the career of Jim Ellis. I think that's incredibly important, Bo.
We appreciate it, John. Take care, man.
Thank you.
John Cohen on the Out of Bounds show. So he played at Mississippi State. Jim Ellis called all those games. He comes back to take over the program, rebuilt it. Jim called all his games. I don't know how many times he interviewed John. And then he hired Lamonis, who won the national championship. And he got to go in the booth. I know that was cool for John. He got to go in the booth every now and then for an inning or two and call games with Jim Ellis. So 46 years for Jim Ellis, calling games all over the country and in Hawaii, because Ron was the first to take teams out to Hawaii to play baseball, which is amazing. They were able to do that back when they didn't really have a budget, but that was cool. And we'll get some other guys on or people to celebrate Jim Ellis. But I want y'all to think about that. All the College World Series, he called a Final Four and a 98 SEC championship game in football and a national championship team in baseball. Thanks for listening to the show. Lunch today brought to you by Fleetway Market and the Market Cafe in Gluckstadt. And they've got the blue plates, and the grab and go is amazing. So if you're hungry but you're on the run, Fleetway Market and the Market Cafe in Gluckstadt, they've got the grab and go for lunch, but they've got blue plates, and you can eat there in the Market Cafe inside Fleetway Market. Thanks for listening to the show. We had a heck of a show. It was a good bounce back. I was not happy with yesterday's show, but I couldn't get my bearings coming off that New Orleans trip, which was amazing, in the Saints game. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening to the show. We're on Spotify. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds.